So what I want to talk to you today about is something that has been dubbed environmental e-health. Now, the term environment, as you'll see as we go a little bit further along, is a little bit unusual. We often use that word very, very poorly because we're talking about the setting. The environment in which we're sitting here is a room. There's also the environment in terms of the air, et cetera, et cetera. So there's very poor terminology, unfortunately. But nonetheless, I hope you'll see something in a moment related to my topic, vaguely, that we can talk about in terms of environmental e-health. In the meantime, whilst it's going, let's talk about, if I were to ask you, do you think you are contributing to damage to the world's ecosystem as you're busy on your cell phones, pads, things of that nature? Do you feel you're contributing to it in any way, shape, or form? Some nods, excellent, good, I'm pleased. In that case, you're on my side, and you'll have to agree with what I've got to say here. So here we are then, environmental e-health. In this particular presentation, taking it from the perspective of thinking about readiness, your readiness assessment, getting on and doing e-health. So first of all, background. Let's just talk a little bit about e-health and environmental e-health. So here's the definition that we have for e-health: the use of information and communication technologies for health. Wonderfully simple. Sadly, it's a definition that is not typically used. We then come on to look at the other reality of the situation has been implied by the presenters, and that is there's no aspect of health or healthcare that has not been, is not being, or will not be impacted by e-health. And so everything essentially is on an exponential trajectory. There was something I read in the Indian Times last night, or yesterday rather, where they've got a really neat new app for a phone that can detect cancer. Well, constantly we've got new imaginative ways of using our technology. That's a bit of a problem. It doesn't matter what we're doing, whether or not it's a server farm, whether or not it's teleconsultation, whether or not it's e-learning, whether or not it's any of the peripherals, if even simply plugging in to recharge your phone, you in actual fact are causing damage. This is my growing summary slide of what e-health is. It's been going for a number of years, as you can see there. But basically, there's a whole variety of activities, and we're really focusing just today on this one little bit here. So what is environmental e-health then? This is the definition that was prepared. The study of the impact of e-health on the environment, its harms and benefits. And then obviously you want to try to mitigate the harms, but also leverage or enhance the benefits. So what about environmental impact of e-health? Well, we actually came up with a model. Here it is. We're considering our natural environment, so we've got the water, the air, and the earth there. And basically what we're saying is that once you start looking at that, you can in actual fact see impacts at 3 different locations: the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream. And what we have to learn to do is educate ourselves about this and then change our process and our practice and our policy so that we mitigate the harms and accentuate the benefits. So what did we find when we did our scoping study? First of all, we've got the upstream here, resource depletion. We are taking out a large number of natural resources from the earth. Every one of the phones that you have somewhere around the region of 60 metals in those phones. Some of them valuable, silver, gold, some of them not so valuable, but nonetheless, we're taking out a lot of resources from our earth. That takes energy. Then we're also creating those things and we're stuffing them into packages and we're sending them off all around the world. That takes energy. We also then have the midstream, and that's basically the usage and the maintenance period, and nothing much happens there except you have to constantly plug things in order to make them work. And of course that needs energy and therefore creates greenhouse gas emissions. Then you have the other side, the e-waste issue, or the WEE, the waste electronic equipment. That's a huge and growing issue. What happens to people when you send them a new technology and you're sending it out to people who are living in the rural and remote regions? They don't understand about appropriate disposal of these pieces of equipment or even have the facility in order to be able to do so. So we're creating a steadily progressing problem. They're just thrown away in order to contaminate the earth or the air, especially if people try to inappropriately recover some of the components. And then finally down the bottom, one of the other things that we found as we did our scoping study was that life cycle assessment, really truly understanding from the time of conception through the time of reuse or breaking down the product, what exactly is the environmental impact of that? We don't really have any good life cycle analyses at this point in time. So environmental eHealth readiness, what about the readiness aspect? Well, here's readiness. This is what it's defined as: the degree to which users, healthcare institutions, and the healthcare system itself are prepared to participate and succeed. So we can then twist that around and we can then create an environmental eHealth readiness definition. Same thing, the degree to which users, healthcare institutions, and the healthcare system itself are aware of and able to ameliorate environmental impact of eHealth implementation. Bear that one in mind, because that's a new definition that you're going to see lots of in the future. So we took a look at the literature and we did the usual things, and we sort of got our keywords together, had a fair number of hits initially, but once you took out the ones that we're talking about disaster preparedness instead of readiness preparedness, or the ones that were talking about other issues that were not mainstream or did not have a framework, we eventually came down to very, very few papers. And we looked at what each one of the frameworks that they described in those papers. And guess what we found? Models or frameworks noting the environmental impact of eHealth, none. So obviously we're not paying attention to it. Papers using the term environment, there were 4, but they weren't using it in the proper way. They were, as I said before, using it as the environment in which we exist. So what? Is this really of importance? Well, maybe. There is a picture of 1 ton, not ton, but ton of CO2. And every time you tweet, you contribute 0.02 grams of CO2 to the atmosphere. Or every time you actually do a Google search, 0.2 grams, or an email, 0.25 grams. Well, that's not a lot. Except then you look at how many of these darn things we send every day. You look at the numbers. We're talking, especially when we get down to emails, trillions per year. That's astonishing. And it's only going to increase because some people would like a cell phone, a smartphone in the hand of every person on this planet. Yeah, they're maybe 3 years old onwards anyway. So there's another issue that we haven't spoken about yet, and that is the concept of sustainability. This was very well done many, many years ago in the Brundtland Commission. And their concept of sustainable, I've slipped it in terms of the eHealth here, one that uses ICT resources to meet the health needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own health needs. We're not doing that at this point in time. So, summary and conclusions. Well, there's a whole lot on this particular slide, but I'll go through some of them, I think. We have to be aware, make ourselves aware. We are proponents of eHealth, trying to make it go forward and surge on. But unfortunately, we have to be thoughtful about this too. So all of us here have to become aware of the fact that environmental eHealth is an issue. We are doing damage to the environment. What happened to that phrase, first do no harm? Yeah. The growing depth and breadth of the applications that we are creating, we're very, very innovative, and new apps are coming along, new tools are coming along all the time, and we're spreading them further and further into the rural and remote locations, and huge numbers are appearing in the urban locations. So there's also differences in the developed and developing world, in terms of our knowledge and abilities in terms of how to handle e-waste. We have to recognize that, and we have to beef that up in some locations. And then my mantras, since we're here in India and people have already mentioned mantras, mine are technologically appropriate, culturally sensitive, and locally relevant, but I now have slipped in a 4th one, and that is environmentally sustainable use. So we require, at the bottom there, EEIA, Environmental eHealth Impact Assessment. And so we don't yet know how to do that, and so we need tools in order to help us along that way, but they'll be coming along in the not too distant future. And what we want to do, as I said before, is we want to influence and change the practices that we do, the processes that we undertake, and the policy that is put in place to allow us to do what we do.